In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use effects plugins from Soundtoys, UAD, and Valhalla in Studio One, or Fender Studio Pro as they're calling it now. But the concepts will apply to whatever plugins or DAW you use. I'm David Duarte, aka Paper Trails. I'm an artist, music producer, and engineer, and I'm here to share the insight and knowledge I've acquired over 2 decades working in music. Creative effects like delay, reverb, modulation, and saturation are some of the best and most fun ways to create a musical aesthetic and build scenes within your songs. This video will be less of a technical how-to and more of a creative exercise in what you can do. Let's get into one of the scenes of this song, starting with the vocals in the second verse.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
Keep in mind, this is going into an EQ and compression vocal chain on the lead vocal bus, which I'm not getting into here. Some of the effects I'll be using will be before that vocal chain, and others will be after, and I'll explain why. What I'm trying to accomplish with this section of the song is to create a really spacey, trippy, gritty, psychedelic vibe. I want to feel like you're alone on a 2-lane highway in the middle of a desert on a motorcycle and the only light is your own headlight. I'm imagining the feeling of a cold, dusty wind in my face. How do we achieve that with sound? First, I'm going to use some effects before the main vocal chain. In Studio One, I can do that by using the split tool to cut the wave file for just this section of the song, because I don't want these effects for the song's entirety, just this one scene. Then I'm going to highlight that clip, make sure I've got the inspector window open, go down to the bottom of the screen where you'll see event effects. And if you don't have any effects here already, there will be a button that says enable. We'll click that and then we can add plugins or effects chains in this box. What this is going to do is free up some processing power so your computer doesn't have to work so hard. We'll start with Decapitator by Soundtoys. I'm using the filters to shape the distortion, blended to about 30%.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
You'll want to listen to how each of these saturation models sound on different source materials so you can train your ear to hear what they do. Remember, when you're training your ears on this stuff, to go extreme with all the settings so you know what you're listening for, and then dial it back to more subtle settings. Unless your music calls for more extreme settings, then go for it. I definitely want to EQ this now and go for a much smaller, almost racetrack loudspeaker type sound. So I'm going to use FabFilter Pro Q, followed by Echo Boy. I'm using the master tape setting with the saturation set to the max. Then I'm going to filter out a lot of the lows and highs and set the mix knob to around 25% so it doesn't conflict with the lead vocal. I have it on a ping pong setting with a 16th note and a dotted 8th note. Usually a ping pong delay is used in stereo, but I'm keeping everything mono at this stage. I'll introduce the stereo stuff later. The vocalist has this Michael Jackson-esque percussive element with his vocal here, and the ping pong delay adds some more rhythmic movement to it.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
I'm happy with that, so I'm going to render it so these plugins are committed and no longer using any processing power. If you need to tweak these later, you can always click restore. So you're committing, but with a safety net, like a choose your own adventure. And if you don't like how it's going, you can always go back and choose a different adventure. Now I want to add some more effects in parallel, and one easy way to do that would be to duplicate this track and process the duplicate separately. Here I've done that by right-clicking on the channel and clicking Duplicate Track Complete. I want to keep those effects on this track, but I want to add more on top of those, so I would just highlight the wave and then bounce selection. Now those effects are printed to the track and I can use event effects again. With event effects, I'm going to add Little Altar Boy with an octave up on the pitch and the formant at 0. This blends a little more naturally than the chipmunk sounding octave up formant. I'm also adding some drive because this song is a bit gritty. Now let's add in another tape delay I'm a huge fan of, the UAD EP34, which is a model of 2 classic tape delays made famous in the 70s called Echoplex 3 and Echoplex 4. I have it at a short 16th note delay. Then before I render that, I'm going to duplicate track complete again. This time we're going to set Little Altar Boy an octave lower. And we're going to tweak the EQ and delay settings to account for the tonal differences.
25 minutes ago.
You can hear adding these in, even at a lower level, makes a huge difference in solo. Adding a lot of grit, but not taking away from the clarity. In context, it'll be more subtle, but works to glue it to this instrumental section of the song. At this point, I would render those octave tracks and move on to the next stage, which would be to add in these talk whisper tracks I did to make it a bit more haunting and weird. I've got these first two routed to the lead vocal bus also, so still all going to the same place so far.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
I'm going to use the vent effects again, and with the Brainworks SSL 4K channel strip, I'm going to use some pretty extreme EQ and compression. Then I'll distort the crap out of it with Decapitator on the max drive setting and filter out a lot of the lows and highs created by the distortion. I do the same thing on the double track. We then have two more talk whisper tracks, but these are going to the background vocal bus instead of the lead vocal bus. So I'll just put a little EQ and compression on these and pan them hard left and right.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
Let's bring the lead vocal back in and blend them all in together one by one.
We were all born 25 minutes ago. We were all born 25 minutes ago.
Okay, I'm liking that, but the lead vocal is still not gritty enough. So let's add another instance of Decapitator, this time at the end of the lead vocal bus. I'm using a fair amount of drive here without going too overboard and using the filters and tone knob to shape it. I've got the mix knob at about 90% wet, leaving some of the high-end cleaner sounding.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
Real quick, if you're learning from this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And if you're interested in having me produce, mix, or master your project, my contact info is in the description. Or if you need more personalized help, there's a link in the description for one-on-one coaching sessions with me where we can cover everything from music production and engineering to instrumental lessons. Now I want to start adding in some parallel effects using sends from the lead vocal bus to effects tracks. The first parallel effects track I'm going to show you I call Soundtoys Voc. I'm using Echo Boy on a short tape delay setting to add some width, and in this case I'm using Decapitator in front of it because I want that width a little more gritty. Sometimes I'll use other Soundtoys plugins on this effects channel as well.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
For some front to back depth, I'm going to use a mono delay, and I like to use the EP34 for this. I've got it on a 16th note with a little more repeats than I've been using on the event effects, so it's really starting to get some interesting movement.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
I want to add some more stereo length to this, so let's bring in Valhalla Freak Echo in stereo mode with an 8th note delay, slightly detuned, and with a longer feedback tail. Of course, using the filters to shape the delay. The detuning on this delay makes me feel like the vocal is sprouting roots connecting to the instrumental.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
This next effect, Eventide Quadravox, is primarily being used for some of the backing vocals, but I added it in on the lead as well for a subtle effect. You can create some artificial harmonies with it that sound really cool when you blend them in subtly. I've got it doing octaves up and down and thirds up and down. It also has built-in delays, which I'm using with slightly different timing on each. I filtered both the top and the bottom of this and then sent it to PreSonus Analog Delay, which is also a very cool stock tape delay. I use this all the time. Remember, this is all just creative effects, so there are no steadfast rules, and doing something like this might not be appropriate for your song at all.
We were all born 25 minutes ago.
I want to put this all into a space to go alongside the previous delays, starting with the UAD Lexicon 224, which is an emulation of the digital hardware that's been a staple in studios since the late 1970s. I like this small hall A setting. Of course, you'll want to adjust the settings to fit the song. What I'm looking for is kind of an airy, wispy reverb that will make us feel like there is a cold wind blowing in our faces. This gets us partially there.
25 minutes ago.
To get closer to that cold wind blowing in our faces, I'm looking to add some more airiness, and Valhalla Shimmer is perfect for that. The small stereo mode worked here, but I wanted the reverb to be a little more focused in the stereo field. So I've added the Brainworks BX2098 EQ in mid-side mode, dipping some low mids out, then boosting a high shelf at 7K on the sides, and cutting the same amount with a 7K shelf on the mid channel. This enhances the airiness of the reverb on the sides and takes it away in the middle, and will keep the low mids of the reverb from muddying up the lead vocal.
25 minutes ago. 25 minutes ago.
You might think that would be enough reverb, but you would be wrong. I don't quite have icicles forming on my eyelashes yet, and I want to add what feels like we're in a massive ice cave. For that, let's add another plugin from Valhalla, Supermassive. I've set it to be pretty bright, wide, dense, and with a long tail to get that near infinite icy sound I'm going for alongside the previous two reverbs.
25 minutes ago. 25 minutes ago.
With all these parallel effects going on, I don't really want them all going at 100% for the entire song. I want to use them strategically to achieve whatever feeling each section or lyric calls for. It's all purposeful and intentional, even if the intention is just to make the song sound cool. The way to go about that is to use automation. You can see here on the lead vocal bus, I've got all these automation lanes for the parallel effects tracks and other parameters. And on each of them, the amount of lead vocal being sent to them is changing throughout the song. I'm even automating the effects tracks themselves in some spots, including a lot of the plugin parameters. You can either write these in manually in these automation lanes, or you can go to automation mode and you can use a touch, latch, or write modes to use your mouse, or a DAW controller like a fader port. You can automate just about everything. Not saying you should on every song or every plugin, but know that you can. This will create a lot of movement and help to create those scenes I talked about earlier. By changing the effects balance throughout the song, you can quite drastically change the scenery from section to section. And just like with word painting, you can do some overall thematic painting with the production. This song is quite literally about the inevitability of change and it coming when you least expect it. So in order for the production to support the lyrical theme, the vocal textures must change with each section. Now I'll set the automation mode to read on the vocal bus and activate all the effects sends so we can hear what it sounds like with all the effects engaged and the automation going.
25 minutes ago.
You can hear that I'm not relying upon one single effect, but a combination of effects to set the scene I imagine in my head. Alternative and indie genres are typically very stylized production-wise, but with a lot of freedom to do new, interesting things. I'd love to hear what some of your favorite effects plugins are and how you're using them. I'll leave links in the description for the songs so you can hear how the different scenes work in context. See you in the next video.